So, hello and welcome to Intuitive Connection. I'm your host, intuitive counselor, and spiritual guide, Victoria Shaw. And today I am super duper excited because we have a guest, Daniel Branco. He's a Brazilian neurologist, neuroscientist, Harvard trained in brain mapping, Wharton MBA, author of Spirit Duality, a spiritual initiation for rational people, host of the High Consciousness podcast, and founder of Conscious Alma School for Consciousness. And after near-death experience at 41, he works at the meeting point of neuroscientist, entrepreneurship, and consciousness. And I'm so excited to talk to this gentleman because we have the same sort of origin story or path, and you don't know this about me yet, Daniel, but of having these burning questions about what is consciousness and what's the relationship between the mind and the body, and wanting to understand all of that, and starting our journeys believing that we would find that by studying the brain.
Right.
And so that's what led me to get my doctorate from Princeton and my postdoc and all of the stuff that I did before I also left that line of work, because I came to the realization that the questions that I was seeking could not be found where I was looking for them. So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from talking to you before this and following you a little bit, it seems like you have a similar story.
Yes, a very similar story. I pursued a career, like an academic career, and did all that. Became an MD, neurologist, neuroscientist, postdoctoral fellow in brain mapping, all of that to come to the conclusion. And the goal, the original goal behind me going to medical school was because I wanted to understand how the brain creates consciousness.
Right.
So it wasn't really like because I want to see patients, I want to decide what specialty I'm going to pursue. No, I wanted to understand the brain. That was the point. And at some point, I realized that, well, it might not be the brain after all that creates consciousness. Consciousness might be existing in its own right. Like it doesn't really need a brain to create consciousness. Yeah.
So let's talk about that, because I think there are still many people in our current world that take it for granted that our mind and that consciousness, and I don't think those are necessarily the same things, so we can talk about that too, come from activity in the brain. I mean, I think that is, I've had a lot of people on this show. I've had a lot of people in the show who don't even care about this because, they're walking a different talk. But I've had a couple scientists on the show that I think, still believe this. So can you talk about sort of that way of looking at things and why you think it's not so?
Yeah, I think it's much more than many people understanding that the brain creates consciousness. It's much bigger than that. We live in a society that decided to make the assumption that physicality is fundamental, that matter is fundamental, that physical particles are fundamental, right? So for anything else to exist, that something else has to emerge and be derived from matter and matter physical processes, right? Like a physics is the most it could be considered the most fundamental science in a
Right.
sense, because it is the science that informs us what is real, what can be real, what the laws of reality are, right? So that's where I would say much more than many people, most people in our entire society is constructed on that premise that there is a natural world and the natural world has fundamental existence. There was an evolution in a sense from the religious view that we used to have in the past. So in the before the natural sciences became prominent, the worldview was different. The worldview was not that. And I see that as an evolution. I think we made great progress with that kind of worldview, the natural world being fundamental. But I feel like it's now time for us to make another leap and understand that there was some truth in the old worldview, and but it has to be revisited. It's not that it cannot be revisited without taking into consideration all of the progress we made in science and all of that.
Right. So if I think what I hear you saying is spirit used to be fundamental or the way that we understood it. Then
Or
we
God.
or God, right? And then
Yeah.
we moved into the paradigm of materialism where it's the material world
Right.
that is, primary and real. And what you're saying now maybe is we're moving into something else where those two things can coexist and we can sort of understand the material. I'm just making this up, but we can understand the material from that broader spiritual lens again.
Yeah. Well, I think that what the idea I'm trying to spread is that the materialistic paradigm is super very successful. Like we were able to create and develop a lot of progress and technology based on that paradigm, right? But it hasn't answered all questions, and it clearly has very uh, noticeable limitations to what it can answer regarding many other questions about who we truly are. Like, what is consciousness? Are we conscious beings? Because there are some scientists that would even argue that consciousness doesn't exist.
Right.
And it's an epiphenomenon, whatever that means, because it's then we can dive deeper. But then, if that doesn't exist, why do you care about getting anesthesia prior to a surgery? Because if you're not conscious and aware of your pain, you shouldn't care about it, right? Like I
Right.
should
If you're
just
not, it doesn't
that's
capture
not
that
real.
felt sense. It doesn't capture the back to philosophy class, what it feels like to be me, right? What my perspective is. And I also think, because this is a show about intuition, and that is something that a lot of my listeners are super, fascinated by, it also doesn't capture all of the kinds of experiences, outside of our 3D understanding, like intuition, like psychic abilities, like precognition, like telepathy. I'm throwing them all together. Like, the fact that people, and you've had a near death experience, right? That their bodies and their brains will stop functioning, and yet their consciousness continues. And, sometimes in ways that can't be explained away just by random, residual firing of the brain, right? Because they're hovering over the operating table, looking down, reporting things that actually happened.
Exactly.
So
So
all of these things, I think, are limitations of that idea of
yeah,
that the material world is primary.
yeah. So science is a great idea. The materialistic view, the natural world view, is a great idea, is a great paradigm, but it has limitations because plenty of there's plenty of phenomenology out there that cannot be explained by that paradigm. So it is just dismissed the paradigm. The people in that paradigm just dismiss the phenomenology. um, and it's worse than not having an answer. It's actually giving the wrong answer. When when the scientific paradigm tells us that we are our brains, and then whatever consciousness is a byproduct of brain activity, that is actually telling us that we are finite beings, that we are, once we die, we cease existing, right? And that creates what? It creates a society based on fear, because everybody's fearful, and then it creates a society that is hungry for resources, because it's the resources that will prevent the body from dying, and accumulation and wars and all of that. Everything we see in our society is deriving from that basic assumption that matter is fundamental.
Right.
It's the wrong, and that's being very detrimental
Right. And
to
then
our world.
identification with your sense of self, your body, your personality, right? The idea that the things I have, whether they're concrete things or more abstract things or the things I am.
That
I
define you.
Right. I think that's an extension of the same thing.
Exactly. So yeah, and then people want to get rich, for example. Why? because they associate the wealth, those resources, with who they are.
Right.
And that becomes a definition. Oh, so I am someone because I own this and that, or I am someone because I have these titles. I am someone because, and none of that is who you truly are. None of that. Like, not even your ego, not even your name, not even necessarily your body defines who you are. In my worldview, who you are is that which creates everything else.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So what's the alternative? And we're gonna talk more about what you just said too. But what's the alternative? What's how if so so many of us have been taught to believe it's all matter, right? I mean, and again, people listening to this show probably don't believe these things because they're listening to this show. For example, on this show, I frequently talk to spirit guides, and most people keep listening to, after a few episodes of my talking to uh, non-physical beings. So my guess is that most of our listeners have started to crack that veil to understand, okay, there's more to this experience than just what I can experience with my five senses. And, there's maybe more to who I am than who I am showing up in human form right now, right? Maybe my soul persists beyond this physical body. I'm listening to Victoria talk to dead people all the time. And I think maybe it's a thing, right? So I think a lot of us are kind of and more people are on the brink of believing in stuff like this. But believing in stuff like this does do a big kind of flip around to the way that we ultimately have to perceive reality, right?
Right.
So from that scientific lens or from that neuroscientific lens or from whatever lens you want to present, what's the alternative to this materialist way of looking at things?
I think that the first step, and that's actually part of the constitution of the consciousness almost school of
Yay.
consciousness that I'm working on, which is we should let go of believing and beliefs, I think. Because, we talk a lot about limiting beliefs, but the thing is that every belief is kind of limiting because it's a cornerstone of your logic, right? So you have to be very careful on about what you take as your belief. So what I propose is that we need to understand where everything comes from. What are the first principles? So realizing that one such first principle of our society today is that matter is fundamental, that's something to be revisited and questioned because most people believe that matter is fundamental. And we don't want necessarily to disbelieve that or like to create a new belief instead. What I invite people is to question and be comfortable living in uncertainty. I think leaving the doors open to possibilities is super important. So instead of believing that, well, all of those experiences are real, which in my case, like I personally accept them to be, but I think the most important thing here is that we have to make a choice because that that matter is fundamental is not a discovery of science. That's an assumption of science, right? So science doesn't have the means to disprove its own assumption. It's not even if that happens in the future, that's not what it's supposed to be doing. It wasn't designed for that. And what happens is that most people believe that matter is fundamental, physicality is fundamental because of science. Science says so. But that's definitely not the case. What science is doing, it's informing us on how what the rules of the material of the natural world, the physical world are. That doesn't mean that the entirety of reality is limited to the natural world,
Right.
to physicality. So there are other realms of reality. And then we have to make a choice. Like so if we don't we the choice is should probably consider this choosing not to assume that matter is fundamental, but that matter is a construct, something that exists, and that we have a method to deal with that. And the same is true for consciousness. Consciousness exists, like whether you like it, the idea or not, like it doesn't help dismissing it, because everything we live and everything we feel, we only feel in consciousness. So we cannot dismiss the reality of consciousness, right? Whether it's deriving from the brain or not, it's not something that science can answer, but we can choose to assume, to make a choice that that the brain might not necessarily be creating consciousness. It could be the other way around. Consciousness might be creating the brain for all we know. And then all of our experience, by just changing the assumption, so it's not a matter of belief anymore, by just changing the assumption, all of our conscious experience gains much more legitimacy, because now we accept it to be real as matter. And that's all about choice more than belief. It's all about choosing a framework.
You said so much beautifulness in there. And I want to pick up on it because one of the things that, I think I shared this on the show a lot, and it's definitely how I understand the world, is that our beliefs help us to navigate this 3D world, right? We have this conceptual understanding, and that's how I believe that's how we create our reality, right? So we are creating within, the framework of the things that we believe. And because we often believe things that are contradictory,
Yeah.
that's what makes it all so fun and also keeps it loose, right? And so the way that I personally deal with my belief systems, to the extent that I'm aware of them, because again, sometimes they're assumptions, right? You're saying the whole materialistic paradigm is based on the assumption, that matter is primary. And, that's a big one, right? That we think is the result. And I love that. So I want to highlight that again. And so sometimes we're not even aware that something's an assumption, right? But the more that I am and I love what you say. I choose what to believe. I choose what's helpful at a certain time, and I wear it loosely because I understand that, I want my beliefs and my conceptual framework to be flexible enough to serve me and what's going to be the most useful now.
Yes. It's a
Because I
working belief.
recognize it's a working belief. Oh, beautifully put. Exactly. And I don't want anything to be more than a working belief, because then I forget the truth of who and what I really am, which is the energy or awareness that's choosing what to connect with right now and where to
Right.
focus my attention and what to give my energy to. It's not the conceptual framework that's right or wrong. It's how I navigate it as a awareness, as a consciousness.
Right.
So that's how I understand things, but I'm throwing it back to you and seeing how that lands.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. Like it's totally okay to have working beliefs. It's just dangerous when we forget that they were assumptions, choices, in like a working beliefs, and start to take them as the ultimate reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where the danger is. Ultimate reality is, I think ultimate reality is something that is quite beyond our grasp at this stage of our human evolution. We don't
It,
really have the means to make sense of it.
And I don't think we need to make sense of it. I think it's great to have a working reality and understand the consensual working reality to enough of a degree that you can function in it if you so choose, or how
Yeah.
you so choose, right? Because some of us, there are things of the consensual reality that I unplug from because they're not fun for me, and then there's other things that I'm like, I guess I have to pay my taxes, in order to like keep my house and things like that, right? So
Right.
there's some play, but and I want to go back to the thread that I was getting, but and I also think that it's helpful to have a little bit of conceptual reality because it keeps us grounded in the 3D, or maybe even the 4D or the 5D. I don't know how far it goes, but it helps us function in this consensual reality, and it helps us have this experience. But I love what you're saying. If we lock into those beliefs too hard, it takes us out of who and what we really are.
Exactly.
And I think that's beautiful. My little nudge in my head is taking me in a slightly different direction, but I think that they line up. You said something, I think I was chatting with you yesterday, in a different forum, but you were talking a little bit about science and just the role of science in general. Because I was throwing at you quantum physics, right? Because a lot of the guests that I've had on the show say, look, the materialist paradigm can't explain this stuff, but quantum physics tells us that consciousness is primary, that everything is made out of consciousness, and that solves the problem. Um, but you're not satisfied with that answer either, right?
Well, the problem is that if you ask quantum physicists, they don't have a consensus about that.
Okay.
Like there, because quantum physics became a matter of interpretation. It seems like there's a need for an observer for the collapse of the wave function, and but then people started extrapolating. Oh, that's where consciousness exists. That's so quantum physics has shown us that consciousness is real, and those are those are like it can be seen as like a very far-fetched conclusion from what the physics is actually telling us,
Got it.
right?
So it's an
So
extrapolation.
yeah, and I'm not a physicist, so I don't. But what I can say is that quantum physics hasn't discovered or explained consciousness. Not yet. It might happen in the future, but I'm suspicious because for you to even know that consciousness exists, you have to be a conscious being. So the example I was using yesterday in our conversation was pain, right? So pain is a phenomenon that most people consider to be normal because it's a consensus phenomenon. Everybody
Right.
feels it, right?
Well, not everybody. Apparently, I looked this up after the conversation because I was pretty sure, but there is a subset of the population with a genetic condition whereby they don't feel pain. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
But
So,
it's a common experience.
but my point is that it was never science who discovered pain. Think about it, because science is a method for discovering things. It's a discovery method, an exploration method, right? So if it was a super good method, science would have revealed the existence of pain. But no, we've known about pain since ever, since before we invented the method, since before we invented science. We never needed science to tell us that pain exists.
Right. And in fact, science can give us some correlates of pain. You can measure what's happening in the body when someone has the subjective experience of pain. We can ask people to assign numbers to their pain and then use that in a psychological study, but you can't get inside someone's head and discover through science the felt sense, the felt
Exactly.
experience of experiencing discomfort.
That's what I realized doing my brain maps. Uh, I could see the correlates of the phenomenon, but I couldn't. I, I, I'll never have the means to understand what the phenomenon really is by just looking at the physical correlates of the phenomenon. So when we study pain, when we ask a patient, how bad is your pain on a scale from 1 to 10, that's us using a conscious instrument, which is the patient, to probe a reality that we know exists because we have first-hand access to it. We have first-hand access to that reality because we are conscious beings. But science as a method has no consciousness. Only scientists have consciousness. So it's an ancillary method to help conscious beings make sense of the physical world, but it's not a method that really allows us to discover aspects of reality that are not part of the natural world.
Right. And
So
it's been
that's
a
as simple
long,
as that. Yeah.
yeah. And even before the neuroscience, like my, doctorate, because I didn't want to go to med school because the people in the classes scared me. And I just I didn't like the pre-med track. So I had to skip over to neuropsychology and psychology, and I ended up in cognitive psychology, right? But
Right.
but my field that I got my first degree in was an offshoot of, behaviorism, which was this whole idea we can't describe what's, going on in people's minds. So let's just skip that and let's just look at observable behavior, right? So this has been, and, this was no, I'm 50, more than like 60, 70 years ago, right? Where they, where people were saying, let's just cut the mind out of the whole thing altogether. So this has been a longstanding issue in science, trying to
Yeah.
get at that felt sense of,
And it's an honest take, I think, because
yeah,
look, we cannot really make sense of that. It pertains to a reality science cannot probe into. So let's focus on what we can measure, behavior, and
right.
and and try to make sense of humans by looking at what can be measured. And I think it's an honest take. You understand there's limits to the method, to the scientific method, and you're sticking to what you know about
Right.
the method, right? But it's incomplete because there's this whole other reality happening that science cannot probe, and that we're still and it's much more related to our true nature because we
Yeah.
only know it's actually what makes us us. It's because we have that experience. It's because we feel pain. It's because we are self-aware. It's because we have conscious experience. It's because we can make sense of different types of qualia that we know that other reality exists, that we know that first person reality exists, that consciousness reality exists. And we it doesn't matter if it's too tough luck if that science cannot go there. We still know it exists. So we need something else, another method, another way, another assumption to start exploring that other reality. Yeah.
Another reality. I love that. Where does the mind fit into this? Do you think the mind is conscious? Is it separate from our awareness? I mean, a lot of spiritual teachers would make the distinction between consciousness and the mind.
Yeah, I will do the same because, well, the mind, first of all, has conscious and unconscious and subconscious aspects to it, right? So, brain activity and bodily activity also. My heart is bumping right now, and it's beating right now, and I'm not necessarily conscious of that. And I'm breathing right now in a subconscious way, right? So there is a lot of activity going on in our body, and not all of that is conscious. Not all of that is experienced in consciousness, right? And the mind, there is a place where everything that we believe to be us and create our identity exists. Like if I am Daniel, if I believe to be Daniel, that information is encoded in my brain that I'm Daniel. When I hear the name Daniel, neurons will react to that name in a different way if I heard someone calling another name.
Right.
So that I am Daniel, that's established in my brain. It is encoded there somewhere, right? And there is in when that phenomenon, when someone calls my name and I react and I'm living that experience, I'm conscious of that experience. It's a conscious experience, but that's happening. There is a mind, there is a mental process happening that I'm aware of, that I'm conscious about,
Right.
right? So the
S-
mind, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You explain it.
So the mind is a byproduct of the brain. There is the brain activity creates a mind.
Yeah.
But then, but then, why is it then that some aspects of the mind are experienced, whereas others are not necessarily, right? And then, if those areas of those processes are experienced, then who is experiencing those processes, right? So I think that consciousness exists in a layer, in another layer, so to speak. So consciousness is that which experiences the body, the mind, the universe, the whole human experience. And the brain helps in the process. The brain is like a transducer, like a filter that
Right.
allows consciousness to have the Daniel experience,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah,
Or
and
the
I
Victoria experience.
And I often talk about this when I teach because, what happens in the brain in those first 7 years of life when we are really getting, I think, fully, acculturated to this human consensual reality, which we know that's sort of a critical period of humanizing, so to speak, is you're losing neural connections, right? You're losing connectivity in the brain. And you tell me if I'm wrong, because you're the real neuroscientist here and I'm the neuropsychologist, sometimes. But that's my understanding. A lot of what happens is actually a winnowing down of interconnections, which is very consistent with the idea that, as we develop, we're filtering out a lot so that we can focus on what, we've been taught we're supposed to see. Like, this is me, I think babies are born with synesthesia, right? Where all the senses are together. But over time, you learn, okay, this is seeing, this is hearing, this is this object, this is that object. And what it does is it filters down our experience. I don't
Yeah.
think the other stuff goes away, right? Because a lot of us are still having those extrasensory experiences all the time. We're energy beings, and I think it's always happening. I think it's more of a matter of where we, the sort of noise in our head, what we've been taught to focus on, what is filling our space. But we all can still have and redevelop that expanded awareness. But I think early on, the brain starts to create that filter for us.
Yeah. So what did you mention again about losing connections? When
So my
did that happen?
understanding is in early development, a lot of what happens is, you're actually shedding interconnectivity. So you're
Shedding.
actually shed like
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
yeah,
Close.
that's my understanding.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't claim to know like all about that. Also because neuroscience is such a big field,
yeah,
and
I
what I
know.
used to do was like it was brain mapping
Which is
using
also
function,
really, really cool. So,
yeah, function MRI of developed brains of like adult
yeah,
brain. What I can tell from my personal experience is that there is a state of consciousness where you are pure existence, where there is no identity, no language, no memory, no ego. There is just pure existence. I know that because that's the state I found myself in when I had my near death experience. So I found myself in that state. And so I know for a fact that the state exists. So I wonder if that's not like it felt to me like a very primal kind of existence, and it was at the same time so comfortable, so comforting. I like there was nothing I should do or worry about. It was like the most intense sense of peace I've ever had in that state. And then I remember growing up, looking at my body and finding it so weird. And like looking at my hand, like which is related to what you were describing, like a
yeah,
baby starts learning, wow, this is sound, this is vision, this is like a mom, like I have these memories from like childhood looking at myself and thinking, oh, this is weird. So
right,
there is a lot of conditioning that goes for years in the early stages of our childhood where we learn how to be human,
right,
like we learn what it means to be on this planet. We learn like what this well, that hurts. We
right.
learn that. So there's a whole lot of things that we learn because we are in a new context, I think.
Yeah,
Consciousness
yeah.
finds itself in a new context. Yeah.
That's what I got to study during my postdoc is cognitive development, but also social development too, and our development of our understanding of the world and ourselves.
Yeah.
And, it's not given. It's something that we develop, and it's co-created by our playing with other human beings. So anyway, but I think it is consistent with this idea that your brain is a filter. So
Yeah.
let's talk. I could
It's more of a filter than it works more filtering out experience than actually giving you experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's consistent too with the fact that when people have these peak experiences, right? Like when somebody dies, their consciousness persists. When you give someone hallucinogenics,
Yeah.
right? You would think that it would enhance the brain areas, but it actually quiets the brain. And that's why they have these expanded experiences. So it,
Expanded experience, it requires quieting of the mind
right,
because the
right.
mind is what gets in the way. Yeah.
Exactly. And in the work that I do, right, what happens? Like how do I connect with, the dead loved ones, the spirit guides, and the source of wisdom that sometimes if I'm quiet enough likes to speak through these lips, right? It's by quieting my mind. Years ago I went to a naturopath and he was like, "You need a meditation practice." And I'm not for or against meditation, and there's reasons to do it, above and beyond connecting with your spirit guides. But, the first thing out of my mouth, which he didn't understand, was, "But I'm in a meditative state all day." Like that's what I do. I quiet my mind and let things and beings talk through me, right? So, but that's actually how it works. Right? When
Yeah.
my mind is really loud, I'm not hearing anything but my own, and it's not mine, right? The mind is not actually yours. We use that terminology, but I believe it's a socially constructed, way in which I have inadvertently plugged into the human experience. It's not who and what I am at all. There are times when I love to have it and play with it and explore it and co-create with it. But I try as much as I can not to make the mistake of thinking that's who I am.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's how I get the best out of it too, because I can learn now to choose, oh, this part of the mind feels really good. That part, like when I'm overwhelmed with that part of my mind, that's when I really want to power down.
The mind gives us context to live in the physical world.
Yeah.
So we need information. We need it working. It's like working memory and like this working assumption. Everything that is useful for you to work in the natural world in a physical body, in a human body. All of that happens in the mind. And then as you go and fully embrace the human experience, the more use you make of the mind, and the more and the less it's not about it's definitely not about being right or wrong, or that mind you should disconnect, or um, I think it is important to know what your true essence is, which is not the mind, right? It's like a computer that is running and has memory of what's doing. Oh, I'm working now on this Excel spreadsheet. So at that moment, that's the mind of the computer. It doesn't define the computer because that's far from being the only thing that the computer can do. And it tells nothing about all of the transistors and all of the engineering that there is behind the computer. But it's a useful thing. The mind is a useful thing. And the more the deeper you go in the human experience, and the more you want to achieve, for example, or the more success you're looking for, like that is defined in the physical world, the more you have to make use of your mind.
Right.
The busier the mind gets, because it's the instrument that we use to it's a working memory. Like we need that to
Right.
operate.
And the world is demanding that of us, right? Because that's what the world is built on.
Exactly, exactly. So particularly the existing world, the current world, we lose perspective of how many different worlds we already had on this planet. Humanity has already had, based on different assumptions and different worldviews, and it's hard for us to make sense of it because we don't, if there are other lives we don't necessarily remember, and it's hard to make sense of a reality that we are not really living. Right. Because, like, think of how things used to be in the past when people had a different world perspective. It's hard. It's not the same as like we can put ourselves in their shoes, try to imagine how it'll be, but it's very different than being in the situation, believing that that's the real deal, that that's the real world,
Right.
and you have to operate in that environment. So at the end of the day, I think the our friend Reese Brisbane has a great point around the idea that this is all a simulation, like a game.
Right.
It can be definitely understood as such. And then
Yeah.
we have to understand who is playing the character,
Right.
because then Daniel and Victoria, they are characters on this game.
Right. But I think for me, and not everyone sees things this way, but this is how I've come to understand it. You are also creating the simulation, right? It is your consciousness that is, I believe consciousness is primary, right? So your consciousness is interacting with the physical world, but your consciousness is also creating the physical world. So it's doing both things at the same time, which is a little bit mind blowing, but for me it makes perfect sense, right? So,
Right.
like you're perceiving the table, and to some degree you are the table. You're creating the table at the same time.
Yes. And that's very interesting, because if you decide to assume that consciousness is primary, then the physical world exists. It's subordinate to consciousness. It
Yeah.
exists in a sense within consciousness, and it's a consequence of consciousness more than a cause of
Yes.
consciousness, right? So that the whole, again, the brain is not creating consciousness. Consciousness is creating the brain and everything else. Then the question, I think, is, well, if consciousness is primary and it's non-physical, then what is consciousness? What are the rules of consciousness? What are the physical laws of consciousness? Well, they cannot have physical laws
Well,
because we just decided they're not physical.
I know, which
Right?
makes perfect sense to me. It makes
Yeah,
perfect sense to
it
me.
makes perfect. Yeah. So, and then you have to unlearn. You have to start unlearning everything that you think you know. For example, the whole idea of having independent objects. That's an idea of the physical world. Maybe in consciousness, there's no separation between objects. Maybe the whole idea that I'm Daniel and you're Victoria, that's a definition of this physical world. Maybe in consciousness, we are just one and the same, right? So if I am building my own reality, does that mean that I'm building this table, this house, this whole planet, or the universe? Am I the creator of the whole universe? And that's tricky for the 3D mind to make sense of, because it's in that case, it's not like it is Daniel's consciousness creating the whole thing. It is consciousness creating the whole thing.
Right.
And the identity of Daniel and the Daniel as a being exists also within that consciousness.
Amen.
It's not my consciousness, because
Right.
there's no such a thing as, I mean, there is a thing called my hand. It's
Right.
my hand because it's not me. There is a thing called my body because the body is not me. There's a thing called my name because the name is not really me. But
Right.
then when it comes to consciousness, it's not really my consciousness. That's you. And
Right.
you are
That's
one with
you're
everything
part of
else.
it. Right. And people that
Yeah.
have those peak spiritual experiences, right? That is a very common thing when you recognize, oh, unity. We're all one. It's all and that's when the angels come out and sing. I mean, which are also part of you, but like metaphorically, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
those are
there are,
those moments. Is that how you felt in your near-death experience, or was it not um part of that?
well, in my near-death experience, there wasn't much to live and to experience or to tell, because it was a very information deprived kind of experience.
Right.
There wasn't beings, angels, nothing like that. I didn't see anything. It was black. It was dark. It was, even though it was peaceful, but
Right.
there was no information like, oh, this is hot, this is cold. No, there was no color. There was no nothing. There was nothing to process.
Right.
And because people have those experiences with angels and all of that, psychedelics, that that implies structure. So
Right.
when you're seeing an angel and you're having the experience of seeing an angel, that requires a structure because there is information there.
Right.
So an angel is there is a definition to an angel, to what an angel
Well, when
is.
you come back, there's a definition to it because remember we're reporting back and people that have had,
Right.
and again, I think there are different experiences that we can have when the brain is no longer filtering, and probably different places we can go in different levels of creation, and these may or may not be things that we can understand with our 3D
Yeah.
minds.
What else?
Um,
That
but
might,
but people that have had near death experiences will often report when I come back, it's very hard to explain what I experienced there in human terms.
it is very hard. Yes. And that makes me think that there are other layers of physicality or physical reality. When I what I mean by physical is that there is structure to it.
Yeah.
There is a structure to the natural world, so that's why we can study it scientifically. So I think that between us in physical form and us as consciousness, as pure consciousness, I believe there are
Yeah.
layers of reality that we haven't really fully grasped. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of to
And I
explore.
would say
Yeah,
conceptual rather than physical, because
maybe.
some of the places that I have visited with my consciousness are you can know, you can see, you can understand, you can create, but there isn't the encumbrance of physicality.
Right.
That's the way that they explain it. But there is a loose sense of identity.
Right. There are realms out there. There are
Exactly.
non-physical, but they have structure. I think one typical realm that we can describe is math. Like a math, there is this idea of platonic spaces where things exist. They are not physical. And math is a good example because like a, the idea of one, two, three, of counting things, that's a very real thing. There is a it's a thing that exists. But math doesn't really exist in the physical world. You're not
Right.
going to find number one in the physical world.
It's what I'm calling. I have one
It's an
cup
abstraction.
here. Right. Yeah, exactly.
But it's a real, very real one that exists in a space. So I think that it makes sense to think that consciousness would have created spaces that
Right.
give support to. So it's like there are layers of reality, and
Yeah.
like you cannot have a physical reality without it's like a computer program without before the computer does anything you have to define certain variables, you have to give the computer certain definitions, and those definitions they exist in their own right. They are real things, but they are not operating things. They are like concepts,
Right.
which is what you said. So I think those there are spaces out there that are very real and non-physical.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are people that say too, our whole experience, right? A lot of our experience of the 3D world, including the 3D world, is an abstraction as well, right? Because it's my believing that this is a cup makes it so. But
Yes.
I could talk to you all day, but I can't. And so we're gonna do this again. I mean,
Okay.
either I hope with the microphone, not with the microphone. I'm not done talking to you, my friend. This was delightful. But for the sake of my listeners, we're gonna start to wind this one down. And I ask everyone on the show, their first time on the show at least, this one question. So get ready. How do you personally experience your intuition?
Intuition, that's a great one. I've been experiencing my whole life my intuition, right? And I follow it. I follow my intuition even when it's not the most, even when it's telling me to do something like it's not the most responsible thing to do. And but I trust it. But I think there are levels to intuition. There's intuition that seems brain generated because again, there's a lot of processes in the brain going on, and you're not necessarily conscious of all of them, and intuition gives you a window into decisions based on information you have and knowledge you have that is not necessarily entire, that you don't necessarily have access to all of the. Sometimes you just feel that you just follow your gut feeling, right? Because it's a summary of all of your experiences telling you to do something,
Right.
and that's kind of an intuition. And sometimes intuition feels like that. So the first type of intuition feels very internal, and sometimes there are intuitions that feel very external, like someone is whispering in my ear, and like in guiding and giving. And sometimes it even comes with an accent, as I was
Yeah.
telling you before. Yeah, and so it feels foreign. Oh, this is not me. And sometimes I even can have conversation with that, like having conversation with your intuition, meaning it's either us creating. It's amazing because, like, for example, working with AI, you, when you have two different sessions with the very same model, the sessions don't know about each other. So, but you're talking with the same person, so to speak, but they don't have the sense of that, because they are in different. So in a sense, it could be you talking to yourself, like I've separating or creating two instances of your
Right.
being, so in such a way that they can interact and talk to each other. And that maybe that's how intuition works. Intuition is a part of you that is coming back to talk to you in a different from a different
Cool.
perspective. But then
I
again,
love that.
if we are all one, everything is you. Even if an intuition comes with an accent, that accent is still you.
It's all
Yeah.
part of you. People,
Yeah.
I got a question from a listener. I don't know if I've done it as a show or not yet, but it's like on my board of things to address. But they said, okay, if I have a higher self, if there's source, like why do I need spirit guides? And you don't. Like you don't. It's just another, way to think about it because your spirit guides are just aspects of you, just like I'm an aspect of you and but sometimes
Yes.
I find them really helpful. So I connect with them. Like
Like
that's
a
the way I like to think about things.
Yeah, aren't you, Victoria, an aspect of me? Like we live in the same country, we're speaking the same language, we like abide by the same norms. So it's the in a sense you are, if you're talking to me, you are me talking to me in a sense.
Right. We're all well, that's
Yeah.
where I think I want to end this one because I've been thinking about this throughout the conversation. I don't know if you've read the Fifth Agreement by Don Miguel Ruiz, but in the Fifth Agreement, he has this beautiful image of, you're in the movie theater of your life, right? And you're watching the movie of your life. And then you go into the movie theater of your dad, watching the movie theater of his life, or even watching the movie theater of your life. You're going to get a really different story.
Right.
You're going to get a really different storyline. And, we this will open up a whole nother can of worms that we can't hit today. But I think that speaks to the primacy of our own felt sense experience. Like, I am, whoever I am, and we're all part of that one conscious field, I believe, anyway. So this is kind of a moot point. But there's no way that I can know that you're real, that you know what I'm saying? Like it's all, I only really know things from my perspective, right? That's the only way I know. I know what I think that I'm experiencing right now. I don't know if that
Yes.
makes sense. I hope I didn't just open up another can of worms.
All you know that it is, anything you know to be real is that which you experience. Experience is the
Yes.
ultimate it is the ultimate form of probing reality
Yeah.
and building reality. And I think that where quantum physics becomes interesting, because then maybe it's not necessarily what quantum physics says, but maybe because of the doors of quantum physics opened, that reality is created at the exact time it is experienced. So we create reality by just experiencing it. Like,
That's beautiful. And,
yeah.
and I agree with that 1,000,000%. All right, I really can't talk to you all day, but I will have you back. Now it's now it's like you're not even allowed to say no. So share about where we can find you, your website, your book, your online, the consciousness Alma, all of that.
Consciousnessalma.com. Yeah.
Okay, it's all there. So you have a school of consciousness, you have the book.
Yeah. The book, well, I have my own website, danielbranco.com, who has more about me. But the
Okay.
project that I'm really working on now and developing, which derives from the book, the Spirit Duality book, that's the Consciousness Alma School of Consciousness. Yeah,
Okay.
consciousnessalma.com.
All right, we'll have all of that information in the show notes. And if you are if you're hearing this when it goes live and you're in San Diego or wanting to travel to San Diego at the end of September for the Transcendence
Retreat.
Retreat,
San Diego
um,
Transcendence
there you go.
Retreat.com.
Thank you. Yep. San Diego Transcendenceretreat.com. And do you know those dates? Because I didn't write them down, but I know
It's
it.
September 19th through the weekend 19th and 20th.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. The 19th and 20th of September. It's a great lineup. I'm going to be interviewing a couple of folks from that lineup. So if you're hearing this live, come out and hear Daniel's presentation there. I'll be there on and off throughout the day supporting my podcast network, mindbodyspirit.fm. I attended last year and it was amazing. So we can see this gentleman there too. Any parting words? This was so much fun.
Well, thank you, Victoria, for having me, and I hope this conversation has an impact on people's life.
I think it will. I think
Yeah.
it will. And listeners, man, and I never get tired of saying this. I just want to thank you all for tuning in. It's because of you I get to have this podcast. I get to have these conversations. It's just such an honor and blessing. And I love and am grateful to each and every one of you. So enjoy the rest of your day and namaste.